There are currently 6 kingdoms in the Kingdoms trading card game. Now, if you follow along with the lore, the way these kingdoms come to be is through the 3 big spirits in the game: Tanis, Marif, and Borom. So far in the game, at least at the time of recording this video, Tanis has made 2 kingdoms, Silvermoore and Estercrest. Marif has made 2 kingdoms as well, Cluedace and Furbish, and Borom has made 2 too, Linford and Winterton. Now in this video, I'm going to be doing a kingdom profile breakdown of the Kingdom of Silvermoore, which came out in Set 2 New Designs. In this video, I'm going to be telling you the best way to play with the Kingdom of Silvermoore, some of their best cards, some of their worst cards, some good cards to add into the deck, and some ways to beat it if you find yourself playing against it. Let's go ahead and jump into this video. The Kingdom of Silvermoore came out in Set 2 New Designs and currently has 17 cards in the game with a combination of battle cards, spells, 2 sacreds, as well as a legend. Once Set 3 comes out, they will be gaining an additional spell, additional battle cards, and their 3rd and final sacred. When it comes to the Kingdom of Silvermoore, as with every kingdom, there are some cards that stand out as the best or the better options among them all. For starters, you could say Silvermoore Gates is probably one of their better battle cards, just for the fact that it has both defensive and bleed. It's a cheap costing card when you consider everything that it does, and it has 1400 health. Now, there are a lot of battle cards that can deal quite a lot of damage, but there are other cards that make this card even better. Additionally, Chainmail Maker is probably one of their most pivotal cards, especially if you're able to build a board state, because this card at the end of every single turn gives additional health to cards that have bleed or potentially both bleed and defensive, depending on what the card has. So if you're able to have both of these cards out, this card can continue to grow and get bigger, especially if your opponent's not able to deal any attack damage. Another one that's nice to have is Capped Rams. This card isn't necessarily high hitting, but it is good to get around some problem cards and you can chip away at your opponent's sacreds. There are a few other battle cards, but I would have to say if we had to choose, I also would say that probably Frontline Warriors is great because it is a great card draw card. Does have defensive and bleed, so it is good for that purpose, and it can benefit off of Chainmail Maker. And then Silvermoore Saint's pretty good because it does give you some magic bonus and it allows you to search out some neutral cards. However, I don't know if this card would be considered one of the top cards, though I do think it is good to run 3 of those. As for spells, there are some spells that are better than others. Recruitment is good because it does allow you to look into your graveyard. Silvermoore does a really good job of having some graveyard recursion, so it is okay to send some cards to the graveyard, which kind of plays into strategy. I would say another spell that is worth considering is the card Unity Blades. Tanis Kingdoms inherently don't have a lot of attack, so this is a great card to throw some cards together to generate one big attack if you need to. Lastly, to round it off for some of their top cards, their Sacred Sword of Tanis is an incredible sacred, and normally you want to run this at phase 2. It gives your Silvermoore battle cards plus 200 attack. It makes them cost -1 magicka. It also gives them plus 400 health when you call a Silvermoore battle card with bleed to the field, and it has 1000 health. So 1000 health obviously isn't a lot. However, if you're able to build a board state, this card can remain largely untouched, but obviously at 1000 health it can be partially chipped away, especially if you're playing against another Silvermoore player. They could have Capped Rams to, wherever I put that card, to chip away at it. Now there are some cards in the Kingdom of Silvermoore that aren't as good as others, and these are the 4. Out of all these though, definitely the card that is certainly not the best is Armor of Tanis, for the simple fact that its effects that it has when it is revealed, it is simply not that strong of a sacred, and it only has 800 health. So if you are going to put this in your sacred deck, you need to make sure that you are picking this or leaving it only as an option for phase 2 or phase 3. Because if this is your phase 1 sacred, it is going to be a dead sacred and therefore not a very good card. Luck of the Jester is kind of a fun card, and it can yield some results, but for strategy meta purposes, this might not be a card that you want to include in your deck. New Recruit isn't too bad, however there are other cards that just do a little bit better of a job doing what New Recruit does. However, with it being a common, it is easy to get 3 of these cards, which would be easy to put a place at 3. It's not that though if you have this in your deck you're gonna have a bad option, but just there are better ones out there. And then lastly is Gridlock. Gridlock is kind of a 1-turn stop. Now there are some bonuses for playing Silvermoore spells or like spirit specific spells within the Kingdom of Silvermoore, but I think there just are better options for this, or because you already have some cards that have defensive and bleed, this card might be a little obsolete. It might actually take up space in your deck that you could use for other cards. Now when it comes to overall strategy for playing with the Kingdom of Silvermoore, you almost want to get away with trying to run 3 copies of every single battle card that they have, because they all serve a purpose in some way, shape, or form. However, if we do want to try to cut back, I do think we should run 3 or at least 2 capped rams, because they do have a lot of health, and if you do play some cards, you can certainly bolster them to give them higher attack. So maybe run 2 of these, because these are kind of like a secondary win condition. Zima the Jouster is a rather expensive card, and it is a phase 3 card, but it does offer a lot of attack and can bolster some of your bleed cards. So you might want to run this one. I would say run 2 of these, but you could circumvent the attack power through some neutral cards. Long Swordsman isn't too bad. Maybe run 2 of these, maybe even 3 if you want to, or you could potentially get away with not even using this card at all. More Craftsman, definitely want to run 3 of these, because these give you some good card draw advantage, and if you're already playing a lot of Silvermoore battle cards in this deck, it doesn't hurt to have 3 of these. Frontline Warrior is a staple in the Kingdom of Silvermoore. If you can and you have the opportunity to run 3, use 3 of these in your deck. New Recruit will make your cards cost cheaper. If you want to put these in your deck, it will certainly help, though there are some other cards such as Silvermoore Gates that will make your cards cost a little bit cheaper, as well as your 1 Sacred, Sword of Tanis. So it wouldn't hurt to maybe run 3, or you could do 2, or honestly you can maybe get away with taking it completely out, put some other cards in. Chainmail Maker is a very pivotal card for this deck, especially when paired with Silvermoore Gates or possibly Frontline Warriors. So you definitely want to run 3 Chainmail Makers as well. In my opinion, I think you must run 3 Silvermoore Gates. This is such a great stopper card that I think it can keep you in the game, and you want to run 3 of these. Lastly, I think Silvermoore Saint is good for getting magic bonus and getting into your graveyard. So I think you should run 3 of these as well, because you will be discarding some cards, so it's nice to bring some cards back. In terms of spells for the Kingdom of Silvermoore that are specific to them, I think you definitely run 3 recruitments. Recruitment is not too expensive of a spell, and allows you to search in your graveyard or your fortress for different types of cards. And so this is just a great way to bring cards back out into the field, or possibly search for some neutral cards that you really need. And then I think Unity Blades, maybe run 1 or 2 of these. It is a more expensive spell, costing at 6, but because Silvermoore struggles to have attack power, this is kind of a great way to generate that attack that they need. I do want to take a slight pause in this video to let you know that all my videos that I currently have on the YouTube channel have been organized into nice, neat playlists. So if you are interested into this type of content or any other types of videos, gameplays, product openings, art videos, they are all neatly set up in playlists for you to spend plenty of time watching. Also, if you haven't already, you can check out the Game Crafter, where I have some products for sale, including this Kingdom of Silvermoore deck, and more decks are on the way as they're all being updated, as well as set 3, which is almost done. And then for Sacreds that are specific to Silvermoore, because there's only 2 with the 3rd one still to come out, you definitely want to use Sword of Tanis, and I would advise running this at either phase 2 or phase 3. Don't want to run this at phase 1, because it is in phase 2 where your cards really start to shine as a Tanis player, specifically for the Kingdom of Silvermoore. Now, if you're building your deck for the Kingdom of Silvermoore, there's some neutrals or other cards that you want to consider adding. First, we'll begin with some battle cards. Now, there are obviously staples for every single deck that exists out there, such as neutrals, but then there are some that are specific to the Kingdom of, or to the Spirit of Tanis, that would be nice to add. Let me go ahead and shift these around. For starters, I think Mountain Yeti would be advantageous to put in here. This is kind of like another Frontline Warriors. It has 600 attack, 500 health, and it is another source of card draw. So it might be a good option to put this in here. However, Silvermoore does rely specifically on Silvermoore cards or neutrals. So this might hurt your synergy just a tad bit, whereas neutrals might be better. Temple Teacher is a great card. This allows you to draw a card, obviously, but I think what's really nice about this one is the fact that it can add some attack damage to some of your battle cards, and you're already lacking in attack when it comes to the Kingdom of Silvermoore, so this is great to have. You want to run 3 of these. Rule of the Rebel is a great way to get rid of some problem cards. This is a staple in any deck, and so you definitely want to run at least 2 of these, which I think is the most you can run. This is kind of a wild card. Whoops, as I'm dropping them everywhere. Now this is kind of a wild card pick. However, I think paired with Silvermoore Gates and having defensive, I think having Executor out on the field would actually be a really good idea because it does have 900 attack, and this is a great way to give you that attack power that you are severely lacking in with your other Silvermoore battle cards. So maybe try running 3 of these. Time Scribe would be a great way to keep your cards alive for one more round. Time Scribe is a staple. It is considered a meta card, and you definitely want to run it in every deck. But I would be led to think that maybe you could get away with not running a Time Scribe in your deck, giving you room for another card that can deal some heavy attack damage, or another Silvermoore battle card that you feel would provide more synergy in your deck. Lastly, we have the Village of Glast. We have Glast on the right hand side with Impact 1 Report. So this would allow you to look through your deck. Tanis Kingdoms generally struggle with card draw or getting cards, though Silvermoore does do a slightly better job of that than the Kingdom of Estercrest, but this is just a great way to get around that. And I do think that Representative of Glast would be kind of good because of the fact that it can give 2 cards plus 100 attack. And so again, with Silvermoore already lacking the ability to attack, this might be a good card to consider putting in your deck. Besides battle cards, there's a couple spells that definitely should be considered in a Silvermoore deck, and I forgot to grab one, but one of them is Empower. This gives cards both attack and health, and I think that is important. I'll put it on the screen on the right, but there's also a card called Unknown Power. That is another great card that I think should be put in this deck if you're going to. I think Fortified Lockdown is a potentially good spell to have, and the reason why is because I think you could get away with not running a certain sacred as your phase 3 sacred, which you're trying to stay alive. And this might give you the ability to kind of get the ability of Skylight Fountain and use some other cards. So just a thought, but might be a good idea if you want to run a different sacred that gives you bonuses. And lastly, just a thought for Glass. This is a secret spell, and this might give you the ability to destroy some problem cards that you don't have the ability to get over because you yourself don't have a lot of attack. Now for tokens, there's quite a few tokens in the game that are good to run. However, I've picked 3 here that I think would be the best. 4 I think would actually be very good because you're getting 4 Magicka right away. And even though you're sending the top 2 cards from your fortress to the graveyard, Silvermoore already does a great job of bringing back cards from the graveyard that I think this would be a great spell or a great token to put in your deck. Master's Table is another token that gives you 4 Magicka, and so if you're trying to add more tokens to your deck and you're trying to build a better ratio, Master's Table might be good, though it starts you out at 3 the first turn. And then I just think Nanny Goat is a good staple to have in any deck. And so that way, if you do have to discard cards or get rid of cards, or you're trying to play better tokens, this gives you the ability to extend your turn by sending essentially dead tokens that are in your graveyard or in your hand to the Forgotten to get a temporary Magicka bonus. Now there are currently 3 spirits in the game that are affiliated with the main spirit of Tanis, and that is Sumerin, Charlotte, and Botan, Forceful Advice. All 3 of these cards actually might do fairly well in the deck. Botan originally came out in set 2 new designs and was designed with the Kingdom of Silvermoore in mind. So this might be a good spell, or I'm sorry, a good spirit to run multiple copies of, especially for the fact that it can give you a slight attack bonus with its Impact 6 ability. So definitely consider running that. Charlotte might be good, but this is Silvermoore already does such a great job of holding down the field that I have to wonder if she might actually not be as super beneficiary to this deck. And then lastly is Sumerin. His Impact 2 ability is what stuck out to me, with being able to give your Sacred plus 100 health. With your Sword of Tanis Sacred, that has only 1,000 health, and even though you have a board state or like a defensive board state, might be good to bolster it a little bit. So these are definitely some spirits to consider, though you could get away with just not running any spirits in this deck. And then lastly, in terms of Sacred, to fully fill out your Sacred deck, this is kind of how I think I would build mine. I'd be tempted to do Local Armory and almost do this as a phase 3 because it could give all my battle cards plus 200 attack, keeping in mind that I would try to use that spell Fortified Lockdown to keep me alive in phase 3. Just a thought. I think Eastern Vantage Point would be another good card to include, and maybe make your opponent force them to choose this possibly being your first one, because this is such a great way to optimize your hand and slowly chew through your deck. Skylight Fountain, I did include this, and so if you do run this, there's no need to run Fortified Lockdown, but right now Skylight Fountain is the best card to run in phase 3. If you don't do that, you're pretty much you're almost trying to lose. And then Tanis' Dwelling Place is such a great Tanis Sacred that I really think at this moment it belongs in any Tanis deck. And so I think this would be a great card to include as well. And because of the recent legend change, legends are now allowed to just be in an extra deck, so you always do have access to them. There is one requirement though. In order to bring out a legend, you have to send at least one battle card that you've called to the field to the graveyard to help in calling this card. So all three of these legends are okay. Honestly, Esbrook wouldn't really do well in this deck for his effect, though it simply would just be another legend that you could bring out. But these all maybe have some, they all have some situational things that they would do good in. So wouldn't hurt to put these in your extra deck just so you have them as an option, because you never know, you might find yourself in a situation or a scenario where these actually serve as an advantage for you. Now, if you're playing against the Kingdom of Silvermoore and you're not sure how you beat them, here are some things that I was thinking of. Silvermoore is ultimately trying to build an unbreakable board state. So what you need to do is have the ability to attack cards fast or remove them completely. So thankfully especially if it's another Tannis Kingdom or a Murph Kingdom who doesn't always have a lot of attack, you have the Village of Lori, which does have the ability to deal a lot of attack damage, so that's why I picked Turel as an example. Might be a good card to put in your deck, though he does cost a little bit. Thankfully, Boring Kingdoms have a lot of attack damage that they can deal naturally with their cards. So for example, I think of Psychotic Soldier with Rage and 900 attack, and if you run some other cards that keep your Rage cards alive, this might be a good way to get over them. Bar Bouncer is just a better version of Ula the Rebel in my opinion, so I think Bar Bouncer is a great answer to the Silvermoore kind of board lock that they're able to build. These two legends that Linford has are just incredible and would be great ways to take off some of those problem cards that are on the board. And then lastly, I did include this spell by the Kingdom of Linford. This came out in set 2, where you can give a card Rage and they can use Rage and not die. And then I just simply have the Kingdom of Winterton, because they're able to just deal direct damage without it being declared an attack, or you can get around defensive and abilities like that. So this is just a great way to get over. Now, if you're playing with the kingdoms of, if you're playing with a Mrith-based kingdom, so Cludace and Furbish, two examples I have here. I think Furbish would kind of struggle against the Kingdom of Silvermoore. Though they can silence cards, Silvermoore doesn't have a whole lot of attack. They don't have big sweeping things that they can do. So Washaways I think is kind of a good answer to completely wipe the board state. Though they could play like Temple Guard or Temple Judge and the Light Warden to potentially bring down the stats to get over. And then Enai the Scoutsman is just a great card that Cludace has for building up a large attack and destroying some big problem cards. And so I do think every kingdom does have an answer to the Kingdom of Silvermoore, but those are some ways that you can get it. The big thing if you're playing against the Kingdom of Silvermoore is that you don't want to let them build a board state. You want to try to exhaust them of their resources if you can and make them use their spells, make them use their abilities, and especially if Silvermoore Gates comes out and Chainmail Maker's out there, you got to get rid of those cards. And if you're playing with the Kingdom of Silvermoore, that is ultimately your best combination, and then you want to try to supplement that with some cards that can deal some heavy attacking damage. Thank you guys again for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it. This is going to be the start of a series that will slowly be released over time, giving you a breakdown of every kingdom that is in the game thus far and every kingdom that comes out in the future, so that way you have a better understanding on how to play with it and maybe give some cool strategies and ideas for them in the future. Anything that I want you to know about is in the description box below. And just to end this with a brief Bible talk, I want to encourage you to make sure you spend some time with Jesus today, as it is something that I'll be doing when I am done recording all these videos. Thanks, and whatever time that you're watching this, have a good rest of your day.